To the course. The lower limbs are the extensions from the trunk. They are specialized to support the body weight. They are specialized for locomotion, which is the ability to move from one place to another, and the lower limb is specialized to maintain the balance of the human body. The leg contains the tibia, which is called as shin bone, and the fibula, and it connects the knee and the foot. Various muscles are attached on these bones, which are responsible for the movements performed by the leg. Learning objectives. At the end of this video, the student should be able to enumerate the muscles attached on the bone tibia. The student should be able to describe the origin and insertion of muscles on the upper end of tibia. The student should be able to describe the origin and insertion of muscle on the lower end of the tibia, as well as the attachment of muscles on the shaft of tibia. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Tibia is also called as shin bone, and it is the second most strongest and longest bone which is present in the human skeleton. Tibia is the weight-bearing bone of the leg. The tibia has three parts. It has an upper end, it has a shaft, and it has a lower end. This is a anterior view of the tibia, in which you can see that the upper end of the tibia has a prominent eminence which is called as lateral condyle. It has an eminence on the medial side called as medial condyle. It has intercondylar eminence. The tibia has a tibial tuberosity. This is the shaft of the tibia, and this is the lower end of the tibia. The lower end of tibia has an important characteristic feature which is called as the medial malleolus. Now we will discuss the attachment of muscles. Muscle attached on the upper end. On the lateral condyle, on the anterior surface, there is a tubercle which is called as Gerdy's tubercle. Remember, we have discussed it in the previous video. So on the Gerdy's tubercle, there is insertion of iliotibial tract. Now look into the figure. This is the point of insertion of the iliotibial tract. The iliotibial tract is inserted on the Gerdy's tubercle, and the Gerdy's tubercle is present on the anterior surface of the lateral condyle of the tibia. In this figure, you can see this is iliotibial tract, and the iliotibial tract is attached on the Gerdy's tubercle, or you can also say anterior surface of the lateral condyle of the tibia gives insertion to the iliotibial tract. The tibial tuberosity is a characteristic feature present on the anterior surface of the upper end of the tibia. Now on the tibial tuberosity, the quadriceps femoris muscle is attached via the patellar ligament. The tibial tuberosity has an upper smooth part which gives attachment to the quadriceps femoris muscle via the patellar ligament. So this is the point of attachment of quadriceps femoris tendon. Tibial tuberosity. Now in this figure you can see that the green colored muscle, the green highlighted muscle, this is quadriceps femoris muscle, and it is attached, it is inserted on the tibial tuberosity via the ligament which is called as patellar ligament. This is patellar ligament and it is inserted on the tibial tuberosity. The muscle attachment on the shaft. Now we will discuss the attachment on the shaft. So on the upper end, on the anterior surface, till now we had two insertions, insertion of iliotibial tract and the insertion of quadriceps femoris muscle via the patellar ligament. Now when you see the shaft has a medial surface and a lateral surface. When you look the upper medial surface, I am repeating the upper medial surface, we will identify the medial surface by the help of the medial malleolus. This is medial malleolus and this surface is called as medial surface. So on the upper part of the medial surface, there is insertion of three muscles: sartorius, gracilis, semitendinosus. So three muscles are attached on the upper medial surface: sartorius, gracilis and the semitendinosus. They are collectively called as pes and serenus. These three muscles, they are inserted on the upper medial surface of the shaft of the tibia and they are collectively called as pes and serenus, or they are called as goose foot. Now see into the figure, this is the sartorius muscle, then you have gracilis muscle and the third is semitendinosus muscle. These three muscles are inserted on the medial surface of the shaft of the tibia and they are collectively called as pes and serenus. Okay, the other muscle which is present on the shaft, on the lateral surface, the upper two-thirds of the lateral surface, there is origin of tibialis anterior muscle. So look over here, this is tibialis anterior muscle. It is arising from the upper two-thirds of the lateral surface of the shaft of the tibia, tibialis anterior muscle. Now we can see in this figure, this green colored highlighted muscle is tibialis anterior and you can very clearly see that it is arising from the lateral surface. This one is medial surface, this is the medial surface and this part is the lateral surface. So tibialis anterior muscle is arising from the upper two-thirds of the anterior surface of the shaft of the tibia. These were the muscles which were arising from the anterior view of the tibia. Now we will discuss the muscles which are present on the posterior surface or posterior view of the tibia. The first muscle is semimembranosus. Now you remember there was a groove on the posterior surface of the medial condyle of the tibia. From this groove, the semimembranosus is attached. The semimembranosus muscle is inserted on the groove on the posterior surface of the medial condyle of the tibia. Now you can very clearly see this is the posterior view, this is the femur, this is tibia and fibula, this is the medial condyle and you can clearly see in this figure that semimembranosus muscle is attached on the posterior surface of the medial condyle of the tibia. A groove present on the posterior surface of the medial condyle of the tibia gives the point of insertion for semimembranosus muscle. Semimembranosus muscle. Now on the posterior surface of the shaft of the tibia, there was a line which was called as solean line. From the soleal line, the soleus muscle arises. Now see, this is soleus muscle, and you can see that it is arising from the soleal line. Soleus muscle also arises from the fibula. But for this, today we are going discussing the tibia. So on the soleal line, you should remember the soleus muscle is rising. This green color highlighted muscle is soleus muscle, and you can see it is arising from the tibia. From the soleal line of the tibia, the soleus muscle is arising. Popliteus muscle. Now the posterior surface just above the soleal line, the surface was triangular, and from this triangular area above the soleal line, there is attachment of popliteus muscle. The popliteus muscle is actually inserted on the triangular area above the soleal line. This is popliteus muscle, and you can see this bone is tibia and this is fibula. The popliteus muscle is inserted into the triangular area which is present just above the soleal line. Now below the soleal line, the tibia was divided into a medial part and a lateral part by a vertical ridge. Remember, in the osteology I told you. So the flexor digitorum longus muscle arises from the medial area below the soleal line. This is the flexor digitorum longus muscle. Flexor digitorum longus muscle. It arises from the medial area below the soleal line. In this figure, you can see the flexor digitorum longus muscle. It is arising from the medial surface of the posterior surface of the shaft of the tibia below the soleal line, from the medial side. The lateral area below the soleal line gives origin to the tibialis posterior muscle. This is tibialis posterior muscle, and you can see it is arising from the lateral area below the soleal line on the posterior surface of the shaft of the tibia. The tibialis posterior muscle also arises from the interosseous membrane as well as from the fibula. Look over here, this is tibialis posterior muscle, and you can see that the tibialis posterior muscle is arising from the lateral area on the posterior surface of the shaft of the tibia below the soleal line. Here is the soleal line. Now above the soleal line, the muscle is popliteus. Below the soleal line, on the medial side, we have flexor digitorum longus, and on the lateral side, we have tibialis posterior muscle. Now we will discuss the summary of the attachment on the tibia. The attachment on tibia are very simple, they are very easy. On the anterior view, on the lateral condyle, there is attachment of iliotibial tract. On the tibial tuberosity, there is attachment of quadriceps femoris muscle via the patellar ligament. On the upper medial surface, there is attachment, or you can say insertion, of sartorius, gracilis and semitendinosus muscle. These three are collectively called as pes and syrinus. On the lateral surface, the upper two-third, there is origin of tibialis anterior muscle. Now on the posterior surface of the tibia, the first muscle is semimembranosus muscle. This muscle is attached or inserted on a groove which is present on the posterior surface of the medial condyle of the tibia. From the soleal line, the soleus muscle arises. The soleus muscle arises from the soleal line. Just above the soleal line, from the triangular area, the popliteus muscle is attached. The blue ones are the insertions and the red ones are the origin. So the popliteus muscle is inserted onto the triangular area above the soleal line. Below the soleal line, from the medial side, there is origin of flexor digitorum longus muscle, and on the lateral side, there is origin of tibialis posterior muscle. Very simple and very few attachments on the tibia. Okay, so there is a quiz for you. Can you name these three muscles which are collectively called as pes and syrinus? Can you please name the muscles which are called as pes and syrinus? This is a quiz for you. Name the muscle which is arising from the triangular area above the soleal line. Name the muscle which is present on the medial side of the posterior surface. Name the muscle which is present on the lateral side of the posterior surface. References. The text was taken from B.D. Chaurasia.